Hi, I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., President and CEO of Black Enterprise, and I'm privileged to welcome you to Black Men XCEL, celebrating the best of who we are. This is our first BMX to go virtual, and I want to start by thanking our title sponsor, FedEx, and all our corporate partners who have helped us conquer the virtual space to create a platform for Black men to connect, support one another, and strive for excellence. The motto for this year's BMX is celebrating the best of who we are. And it is a celebration of Black men's collective achievement, resolve, and resilience during one of the most challenging periods of our history. We meet under the cloud of COVID-19 and a crippled economy. We are nearing the end of a divisive, racially charged election, and Black men are under assault at all levels. Moreover, despite the renewed focus on corporate diversity and inclusion, the number of Blacks in the C-suite is dwindling, and Black-owned firms continue to suffer disproportionately during the pandemic. Over the next 2 days, we will hear from extraordinary Black men from the worlds of business, media, sports, and entertainment, and delve into the challenges I've mentioned and share strategies for moving beyond them. As many of you know, 2020 marks the 50th anniversary of Black Enterprise. My father, Earl Graves Sr., founded the company and epitomized the very idea of Black Men XCEL. Even though we lost him earlier this year, our event reflects his vision and life's work. He often said that we, as a people, cannot advance unless we are willing to put ourselves in harm's way. 2020 has proved beyond doubt that harm finds us whether or not we have chosen the risk. In other words, we must advance, and we will advance because Black men excel. It's what we do. Before I engage in my chat with Tristan Walker, let me turn things over to our title sponsor for a special greeting. Please welcome Shannon A. Brown, Senior Vice President of Eastern Division, U.S. Operations, and Chief Diversity Officer at FedEx Express.
Hello, I'm Shannon Brown, Senior Vice President of Eastern Division, U.S. Operations, and Chief Diversity Officer at FedEx Express. As title sponsor of Black Men XCEL Summit, I'm proud to greet you on behalf of the 500,000 FedEx team members worldwide. For more than 20 years, FedEx has been a strong supporter of Black enterprise. And I extend special thanks to Butch Graves and his team for their vision in presenting this outstanding program. The Black Men XCEL Summit celebrates achievements and provides a platform to address the challenges we face. And speaking of challenges, I hope you will join me in giving a special shout out to our FedEx team members and all frontline service providers who continue to give the best of themselves during the COVID-19 pandemic. In each of our lives, excellence should be a goal, a call to action. And we have roles to play in opening doors, not only for ourselves, but for others. In 2017, at the inaugural Black Men XCEL Summit, I had the honor of joining Earl Graves Sr. in presenting the Vanguard Award to Civil Rights Champion Representative John Lewis. And while both of these giants are no longer with us, their legacies are profiled in service, dedication, and excellence. The summit focus on excellence aligns with our FedEx commitment to our employees, customers, and communities we serve. Many people say they don't remember life before FedEx, but in 47 years, we've stretched and grown. We're doing business in 220 countries and territories, and we're shipping millions of packages every day across the planet. A huge key to our success is our people-first philosophy. Without dedicated people, we couldn't rush life-saving equipment to hospitals overnight. Without good people, we couldn't deliver technology to businesses around the world. I also want to let you know that our peak shipping season this year will be bigger than ever. However, our smart, dedicated teams are ready for the job. So when you're making your list and checking them twice, make sure you keep FedEx in mind. Once again, FedEx is delighted to serve as title sponsor, and let's take advantage of the great programs and networking opportunities of the 2020 Black Men XCEL Summit. Thank you and enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm here today to talk with entrepreneur and innovator Tristan Walker. For years, Tristan has blazed trails in the tech space in Silicon Valley. In 2013, this tech phenom founded Walker & Company Brands, which has been developing products and services tailored to people of color. Most notably known for its brand Bevel, a comprehensive grooming experience designed for the specific needs of men with coarse or curly hair. The company then produced the product line Form Beauty, a premium hair care collection developed to meet the unique needs of the increasing number of women with textured hair. In 2018, he sold Walker & Company to P&G and is now a wholly owned subsidiary of the consumer products giant and has joined its family of brands to better serve consumers of color around the world. Today, I will talk with Tristan about how he used tech as a path to entrepreneurship and then creating one of the most innovative hair care products within the industry while engaging in ventures to empower all African Americans. Tristan, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Tristan, would love to, this is our Black Men XCEL Summit. We're excited about having this and excited about having you as a guest. Would love for people to know a little bit more about what got you started as being an entrepreneur in the first place. You're originally from New York, and what got you involved in technology and what you decided to go into entrepreneurship, and what was beating in you that decided to move in that direction?
Of course. No, thanks for the question. Entrepreneurship happened out of necessity. I'm just a kid from Queens, New York, and the running story that I like to give is that I had one goal in life when I was really early, and I was to get as wealthy as possible, as quickly as possible. I realized that there are just a few ways to do it. The first was to be an actor, an athlete. The second was to work on Wall Street, and the last was entrepreneurship. The first of those three didn't work for me well at all, right? So out of necessity, it was very, very important to me to figure out, how I could find a pathway towards wealth through entrepreneurship. And it was really embedded in me from the time I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old back in Queens. I had the good fortune to go to Stanford for business school when I was about 24 years old. And that's when I really understood that entrepreneurship as a kind of conduit, not only for wealth creation, but also the betterment of the world. It was like a drug for me. And I haven't turned back since.
Now, when you were out and that is, obviously that exposed you to a whole bunch of different things when you were at Stanford at that time in business school. And so you were seeing this whole tech world blow up and develop. What made you decide, and looking at, how did you identify this particular opportunity, with Walker & Company saying, you know what, here's something that is missing? Did you do some research, or you just were frustrated yourself personally about, I can't find anything for me when I go into a store looking for products and services to groom myself, there's not something there for me?
Yeah, when I reflect back on the past kind of 10, 12 years of my life, I realized that there are only 3 things that I care about, that I'm dedicating my entire life to. Number one, the demographic shift happening in this country, and the cultural influence of people of color around the world, particularly Black folks. I think it is the single most important theme of my lifetime, and I'm dedicating my life to it. The second thing is really the importance of technology and its impact, not only on companies, but also the unseen or forgotten, right? And then the last one is this idea of great brands. I love great brands, not just because they're great brands, but because they can be a force for good in the world. And I want to dedicate my time, efforts to being at the center of those 3 concentric circles. And Walker & Company really is that, right? I was tired of walking down the retail aisles, not having products that work for me, feeling embarrassed about the design and packaging of those products, particularly considering the fact that we spend more money on those products than anyone else. We're the most culturally influential demographic group on the planet. I felt that our purchasing power and our influence deserved respect. It commanded respect. And I wanted to build a company that really empowered, not only from within, but also kind of empowered folks to do similarly, right? In commanding the respect for this audience that has gone so underserved for so long. It was time.
No question. And so how did you choose, there's a lot of things you could have done, right? And having gone to Stanford, you say, well, I could have followed and tried to say, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna code, or I'm gonna create a software program. But interesting enough, when you talk about Walker & Company, you do say, even though it is serving, you created a product Bevel, you still consider it to be a tech company. And I love that description of it because of how perhaps you distribute it and all the above. So talk about how you decided, you know what I'm going to do? This is what I want to do. How'd you come up with the name Bevel, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is what I'm going to do. And why is it a tech company? Why should people look at this as a tech company?
Yeah, so I'll kind of start in reverse. Every company is a tech company. If you're not considering the impact of technology, remember the second of those three things that are important,
Right.
You're not going to survive. Technology is just so ubiquitous right now that it's important that we redefine what a tech company is. Every company is impacted by technology, right?
Right.
We get a lot of pushback. Well, no, you sell health and beauty products. Well, I mean, sure, but technology is the platform of distribution, connection that allowed us to really distinguish ourselves, right? As far as how I got to kind of starting the company and the why and why I decided to do this, and I'll get to the name because it's an interesting story. The conventional advice that you get is do something that's ambitious, right? But the best advice that I got was to do the thing that I felt fundamentally the best person in the world to do, right? Now, some people might hear that and they say, well, you've never, made a health and beauty product before, which is right. But to kind of feel the problem that I had, getting razor bumps on your face, right? The experience of walking down the retail aisle, to be in Silicon Valley as a Black man, to have the ability to raise the money for this, to have an intimate understanding around the cultural impact of Black folks around the world, and to convince and galvanize a group of people to support it. At that time in 2013, I couldn't name another person on the planet who was so uniquely positioned to do it at that one time. So we broke a bit of conventional wisdom. I think everybody on the planet has one thing or more, frankly, that they are uniquely positioned to do better than anybody else on the planet. And this, at the time, it felt like it for me, right?
Right.
As far as Bevel, the funny kind of story about Bevel, I've never really told this story, but I'll tell you guys. I was looking up kind of names for a potential brand. And usually the wisdom is, name a brand after like a lake, because lakes have kind of crazy, obscure last names, right? Or the name of like someone's last name, right? So I wasn't going to name my shaving line like Wenonska-Pomick, right? Like that just doesn't like fly off on the lake stuff, right? So it didn't make any sense. So I went to Google and I entered obscure last names, right? And the first link I got was A to Z, a link of last names. I started with Z and I went down kind of the list, right? Going all the way backwards towards A. So I went through from Z all the way to B, and I read B, and I get down, and I read this name. It's Bevel. And it's like, oh, it sounds good off the tongue, like Bevel. Someone could rap about it. Sounds good. It's hot. So, I looked at the definition. I kind of knew what it was in an obscure way, but bevel is where two lines intersect at an angle that's not 90 degrees, right? So when we think about how we want to encourage people to shave, we encourage people to shave at a 30-degree angle, right? The beveled blade, right, that we have, it just felt like such a perfect name. And in a lot of ways, it was Nirvana and fate, right? And it just worked out. And nobody could use the name. So we were able to trademark it pretty quickly, and the rest is history.
That's a great story. Great story. I want to ask you a little bit about two pandemics and what you have seen as an impact both on society at large and then in particular on African Americans, people of color that look like you and I every day. The first pandemic is the one that people have spent a lot of time talking about. And that's COVID-19 and what it's been its impact on, the United States, the world, and people in general, and people of color. The second pandemic, which is one that I have found CEOs have been less comfortable talking about, and that's the pandemic of racism. And when I say that to them, they oftentimes go, pandemic of racism, yeah, that's been around for 400 years. That pandemic has not been solved. There's no vaccine that we found yet to fix that one. I said, but it's reared its ugly head again, and now it's actually become more actionable. But let's go back to the original one, and then we'll come back to the pandemic of racism. Pandemic of COVID-19. What has that done to change the way upon which consumers have engaged from a retail perspective with company, and hasn't it accelerated technology, making every company, to your point before, really a technology company, right?
Yeah.
And having and it's actually disrupted those to say you're not doing this well enough, so you're going to have to go out of business. And those that have been able to adapt have actually changed. Give us your perspective on that and the impact of COVID, and not minimizing. I'm not minimizing in any way, shape, or form the health challenges that we have faced with COVID-19, but it really has changed business in a lot of different ways as well.
Yeah, it's a very astute point. It's important for me to frame this in two ways. Number one, the consumer impact, and then the worker impact. And then also recognize my privilege a little bit. Like, I'm running Walker & Company housed within a company, P&G, that makes north of $60 billion a year. A diversified suite of businesses. I'm on the board of both Foot Locker and Shake Shack that are leaders in their spaces, right? So, from a worker's perspective, we are able to support them accordingly because we are thriving in this. It's like a weird dissonance that I have in my brain, because ever since COVID started, we've been seeing some of our best revenue months that we've ever seen, right? The kind of folks hunkering home, they need their soaps, right? They need their consumer staples. And it really taught me something about the importance if you're running a business of diversification. So you look at a Procter & Gamble and a Walker & Company, you have a diversified portfolio in addition to some of the other kind of companies that I work with. So from a worker support perspective, I've been in a wonderfully charmed position in spite of the fact that, our people are still disproportionately impacted by things like COVID-19. So it's hard for me to, not reconcile the fact that there are a lot of folks outside of our industry and a lot outside of the companies who are suffering, right? With companies that cannot afford to keep them around. So I think it's important at least to level set with that context, right? Because as optimistic as I am about our business, like I empathize with the fact that there are a lot of people that are just suffering, right? Now, from a pure consumer perspective, it's accelerated the need and adoption for technology in a very big way. So, what am I seeing that's changing? Yeah, I mean, people are starting to get used to buying their shampoos online, which, when you think about it, really wasn't as pervasive as you thought. I remember when I started this company back in 2013, folks would say that, roughly 10% of all commerce happened online. Fast forward 5 years later, 2018, that number was unchanged, right? Like this year, next year, you're going to see that number change in a very, very big way. So finally, the potential for online is important. But it doesn't mean that because you're buying online, you can't interact with your offline kind of retail shops in a way that's compelling. So opportunities now to buy online and pick up in store, right? If you kind of buy some sneakers, you still might want to try it on, right? But the ability to actually pick it up in store. I'll order my Shake Shack in the app and go pick that up in the store as well, right? So I still get to align myself with companies that I care deeply about and potentially spend more as a result, right? Because now I'm building kind of more of a one-to-one relationship. And the reason why I think we've been able to thrive is because, as Walker & Company, is because we had established that relationship from the very beginning. We were digitally native from the very beginning. And so by the time COVID hit, we were prepared for this outcome. And at least with the companies that I'm associated with, Foot Locker, Shake Shack, and even P&G, they were prepared too. A lot of companies were not. And unfortunately, a lot of those companies aren't going to thrive over the long term as a result.
Sure. Before I come back to the pandemic of COVID, the pandemic of racism, I should say, talk to me a little bit about what your thought process was. You started this company in 2013. You started getting romanced, I'm sure, by companies about, hey, we can make you bigger, we can acquire you, we'll make this, and you ultimately decided, you know what, the best long-term plan for us is to be acquired by a bigger company that can provide us the resources, what have you, but still maintain some independence, so you guys still are operating as a wholly owned subsidiary. But as an entrepreneur, you're constantly being, called upon to say, hey, would you be willing to do this? Would you be willing to sell? Would you be willing to sell a piece? What went into your decision? Did you have second thoughts about it? What was, and then ultimately making the decision to do so. And now you're 2 years later, and you can you have some experience now, having worked in it. How has that experience been 2 years later? Do you feel good about the decision? I mean, obviously, I hope you do. To have to sell the company, but yet to be part of a bigger brand and use that for the good of helping people of color.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think, first of all, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, kind of my goal is to get as wealthy as possible, as quickly as possible. I mean, that changed as I got older, right? I just wanted to do things that were in line with my own personal values. And if I'm doing that, I'm doing things from a place of authenticity, integrity, and kind of genuineness, right? And I'm very fortunate and blessed to have found that ministry of sorts, right? Which I'm very excited about. So, at least for Walking Company, I had two goals. Number one, to build something that still has the ability to be around 150 years from now. Like, I really do believe that. I want this legacy to persist in a way that you and your family, right, have really persisted over the past few decades, right? I wanted to have a similar type of legacy because our consumers deserve it, right? So any kind of action that I took was really for the long-term outcome that we saw. The second thing that was going on in my head, and this is around kind of 2018 when we started to get a bunch of folks reach out to us. As a business owner, there's only two reasons any company has failed in the history of capitalism, right? Number one, people give up, or two, you run out of money. Period. There's no real other reason why companies fail if you really think about it in terms of like first principles. So for me, and surprising enough for a lot of people, like we were thriving, like we were growing each year. But then the venture capital kind of industry just stopped investing in kind of e-commerce companies that were growing, right, with physical product, et cetera. So we were victims of the moneyed interests, right? And hadn't we gotten acquired, we probably would have run out of money, right? Because you got to fuel that growth. Entrepreneurship is not as romantic as people think, right? It was 100% my job to ensure that people weren't giving up and that we weren't running out of money. So the first point, we were never going to give up, right? Regardless of whether or not we got acquired or not, we would have, reframed the business so we got the profitability. We would have done what we needed to do. But in order to kind of grow and fulfill that 150-year vision, we knew that this was necessary in a world where kind of the funding kind of started to dry up a little bit. So, how do we decide Procter & Gamble? It was very simple. I was only going to sell to a company that promised two things. Number one, the ability for this thing to be around 150 years from now. And who else in the industry has done it? They've been around for 180 years. After them, really no one else. And then two, a company that shared our values. And I mean that, like as we define it every single day. And Procter & Gamble, their mission is to improve the lives of consumers every single day. They serve 5 billion consumers around the world, the majority of whom are people of color, right? Our mission was to make health and beauty simple for people of color. I am the first Black CEO in Procter & Gamble's 180-year history, right? This is a signal, and it was an important message for me to, make that happen and fulfill this legacy. You asked the question, how's it going? It's going as well as I could have ever hoped. If you didn't even say that we were acquired, I don't think that there's any evidence to suggest that we sold out, right? In fact, we've gotten even better at every single thing that we do. Our design imperative, the ability to develop with great R&D that we couldn't afford ourselves. We have increased our distribution 10 to 15x, right, over the past 18 months. And we're still only in the US, and not that many people know about us yet, right? So the opportunity to fulfill that 150-year vision is very serious. So, the kind of compact that we had is, as long as we continue on that path, I'll be around. If for whatever reason we break that path, then we're going to have that conversation. And they've respected it. I've respected them. And they fulfilled their side of the bargain.
Yeah, there's no question, Tristan. And I think that, you said it best. A lot of people romanticize entrepreneurship, but there are never people who've ever actually put a key in the door and understood that it really does fall upon you, right? And if something's not right or the money is needed, you got to backfill it.
That's right.
You got to do those things. And so having the resources to be able to actually grow your brand and grow what you're doing inside of something else, that's what your job actually is as an entrepreneur. Your job as an entrepreneur is not just for social purposes, right?
That's right.
Your job, quite honestly, number one, is you sort of said, I want to make a lot of money. And there's nothing wrong with that. We live in a capitalist society. And if you do something and you can make a better mousetrap than someone else does, and someone's willing to pay you for it, that's ultimately your job. And if you can do that while maintaining the values of doing something for Black folks, I think I applaud you for it. I will say that. I applaud you for it. I think you're doing the right thing. And so, just keep pushing and pressing on what you're doing and making sure to hold them accountable, right? At the end of the day, because that's really the end of the day, they have to maintain the same values that you have, which you touched upon. I went to your website over the weekend and read through this, the value, you put 6 values: courage, inspiration, respect, judgment, wellness, loyalty. And what I thought was interesting about those 6 is that a lot of times corporations put up, their creed on the wall. These are the 10 things that are most important to us. They live by none of them, right? But it's the right thing because it's politically correct to say, these are the things I'm going to do, but they don't really do it. But you really live by these, right? Yeah. You really do live by these, and the product looks great. And I will be in full candor say, hey, I have not yet.
No, we got to fix that.
But I'm gonna fix that. I have not yet actually used. But here's the thing, though, Tristan. What's interesting is that this is a Black-owned, hair grooming thing for Black men, and not enough Black people know about it, right? We're going to fix that too. Black Enterprise is going to fix that. This Black Men XCEL Summit is going to fix that as well. But I think it's great, and it's testimony to because there are not products. The bottom line, you go into CVS and look for the products that are made for us.
Yeah.
And, I can go put some lotion on and make it work, but it's not quite, I don't know if it's made for my melon, right?
Yeah.
And you and say to a white person, I'm a little ashy. They go, what is that? Now, we all know what ashy means, but not everybody necessarily does.
That's right. Yeah, no, look, the values are personal to me. I said, when I was 30 years old, I'm not going to do anything, hang out with anybody who does not share those things. Whether we're interviewing folks, we'll ask leading questions to get at the heart of each of those things. When we do annual, semi-annual reviews, you're rated against your goal of attainment, but also you're adherent to those values so that these things persist. Now, I wouldn't say that we're 100% there, right? And we've got work to do. I'd probably say we're 65% there, but it's more than zero, which a lot of other companies are kind of victim to. And then also it's important that we continue to check ourselves, right? So it's not to rest on these laurels. Do these values continue to be things that we believe in? And do we need a third party to come in and assess the culture, right? The one thing that is really kind of wonderful about my company is we're majority folks of color. We always have been. And my senior leadership, majority Black women in positions of leadership at my company. And to me, in a lot of ways, that's a competitive and strategic advantage, right? Because the folks who come in live the values, they understand the problems that we aim to solve, and we solve our own problems authentically with some cohesion guided by these sets of values that we have. And it's my challenge to ensure that we get from that 65 to 100.
No question. Tell me, the social unrest, the pandemic of racism I talked about before, and you sit inside now, I'll say 3 corporate boardrooms, 2 that you sit on the actual corporate boards of Shake Shack and Foot Locker, but a 3rd in Procter & Gamble, in that, you are the CEO of a wholly owned subsidiary, but you're the CEO of so you're talking continuously in these boardrooms with folks. And then George Floyd happens and countless others. It wasn't like George Floyd was the first. It might have been the one that sort of broke the camel's back, and people just said, this is just absolutely crazy, right? Because it's happened to me personally. I'm sure it's happened to you. All of us as Black men know that this police brutality and impact has been on our lives. So how did that impact now? You sound yourself, as you said, you live a very blessed life, right? You've been, and in many ways you could just say, hey, I'm good. I, Tristan, am good. You know, I can't get involved in all of that other stuff. But that's not the approach, obviously, you took. What has been the impact? What have you seen inside? And you don't have to be specific to say, well, this is exactly what Shake Shack did, exactly what Foot Locker did. But, you know, you're in, and I see it as well, sitting on corporate boards. What has been the impact of this pandemic of racism? And do you see it beginning to, is it starting to shift? Or is there any good that's going to come out of this where you say that, you know, maybe corporate America is awakening to something? Yeah. And I'm not going to talk politics because I know we're only 16 days away from that. But, you know, if things happen to go in a certain direction, will things ultimately begin to move and change? Are you enthusiastic? Do you see, how are you holding, best question to ask, how are you holding these folks accountable in this environment?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. I think I'll start with the story. You know, I did a TV interview recently with Emily Chang at Bloomberg Television. Emily was my very first TV interview ever, back in 2010. And we were talking about, you know, Black folks in entrepreneurship, corporate boards, that sort of thing. And Emily asked, you know, exactly what you did. Like, am I optimistic for change in the future? And I said, Emily, do you remember, you know, that the fact that you were the first kind of TV interview that I ever did? And she's like, yeah. I said, do you remember what we were talking about in 2010? And she said this exact same thing, right? I've seen this movie before in HD. Nothing has changed. It's the flavor of the month. I want to be optimistic, but I have no evidence to suggest why I should be. You know, I think the corporations too long have done this too shall pass kind of mentality. And the way I kind of reconcile it and maintain my sanity is to go back to first principles. I joined the board of Foot Locker. I joined the boards of Shake Shack. I decided to work with Procter & Gamble because they fit my values. By the time George Floyd and all, we knew we had a response that was going to be authentic, and I knew that it was going to be the right one because I engaged in that process. I wasn't plucked to be put on the board. I interviewed. They interviewed me, and I interviewed them too, right? So in order to, you know, really impact and inspire some change, for me, it was like, you know, forget what everybody else is doing. They're going to be on the wrong side of history, and they're going to fail, right? How can I kind of associate myself with companies, corporations, people that are doing the right thing? So what does that mean in terms of, you know, what this looks like or how it shows up? At least in my leadership, I kind of tell my team all the time, there are 3 things that we have to do. Number 1, acknowledge the trauma, right? 400 years of it. The majority of us at this company recognize that. And the folks that, you know, aren't folks of color at the company, they know it too, but they've been a part of kind of this community and culture for so long that they know that we have to show up in recognition of this trauma that exists. And the way that we show up at work is impacted by it, right? You know, once it's acknowledged, the second thing we have to do is model the way, right? So let's kind of go back to first principle values that we have and ensure that all the decisions that we make are in line with those things. And once we've acknowledged and modeled the way, now we can act. And, you know, the way I think about action is, particularly as a leader of a consumer products company, is before you're an employee of the company, before our consumers are consumers, they are people first. They are sons, brothers, daughters, fathers, cousins, right? So it's important that whatever we act on, we have to treat the human first, consumer second. So as an example of that, you know, around this time, George Floyd, we also decided to, you know, partner with Headspace, the mental health app, right? To offer free subscriptions of the app to our community, period, right? We're a personal care company. Your mental health kind of matters in that. This has nothing to do with selling product. We do it because we understand, right? And that's leading with like an investment mindset, right? With the human imperative first, the consumer second. And on each of the boards that I sit on, there's some derivative of this that's investment mindset first. And I think when you're thinking with investment mindset, you're expecting an ROI on that, and you are incented to see it through. So it's really important for me, and, you know, to wrap it up a little bit, am I optimistic for change? I don't know. But I can do work right now that's in line with values with companies that have the potential resources to promulgate those values a little bit more broadly.
You know, one of the things you had chatted about before was the importance of demographics and what, you know, just the sheer the demographic shift that's taking place in this country, and why those brands that are having brands for good and how they could ignore this. You also more recently, after Bevel, you created Form, which is for women, right? But we also know that there has been the history of hair care products for women has been a checkered past. Not because Black folks were doing it, but there have been some Black folks who did it, and either they did probably what you said, is either they ran out of money or were not properly invested and what have you. So share with everyone a little bit about Form, what that is and how that came about. Even the name, actually.
Yeah.
Quick story in the name, because I think it's a great name too. And what you're aiming to do there for women of color, like you've done with Bevel for men of color.
Yeah, Form is an ambitious product that really had this hypothesis that everyone's unique difference should be respected, right? Everyone around the world, we are 7 billion unique individuals with unique DNA, right? With a unique lived experience. And Form wanted to capture kind of your lived experience in the recommendation of things we offer you, right? So, folks who kind of go to Form Beauty, they fill out a survey. We'll ask you questions like, what zip code do you live in, to get a sense of the humidity there, whether or not you're pregnant or not, whether you've had chemo treatments, if you exercise regularly, do you swim? All these things impact your hair health. And based on the answers that you give us, we'll recommend a collection of products within the 10 that we have for you to use, with a custom regimen for you to use. So this idea of how you show up in your form in the world, in your unique lived experience, we wanted to tailor solutions to that. I think that this is the future of everything. The world is so diverse and so unique. Everyone's lived experience matters. I think health and beauty companies of the future will respect that uniqueness of lived experience and scale it out. Form started as an ambitious experiment, and now we're thinking about ways to really scale that much, much more broadly. But it's an exciting opportunity for us.
That's outstanding. Well, Tristan, this has been a great opening session for us for the Black Men XCEL Summit. I can't think of anything more appropriate, frankly, than having the CEO of Walker & Company and the product Bevel, which is for us as Black men. We're going to have many thousands of people who will be a part of this conference. I want them to try it. I want them to be a part of it. And I want us as African-American consumers, because I do say this all the time, if we don't support one another, then why should somebody else, right? And we need to ask for it, right? We need to ask for those things that are, because the same thing would happen with Black media. If you don't support Black media, then there won't be anyone there to be able to support and write about and recognize and bring attention to. So it's outstanding. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. We want to wish you the best of luck going forward. God bless you and everyone else within Walker & Company, and best of success for you for years to come.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Thank you.
The XCEL Showcase is now open. Our sponsors have a lot to offer, so be sure to stop by to make direct connections with sponsors via video and live chats. See who is actively recruiting. gather the resources and white papers to help you get ahead in your backpack, and so much more. At the end of each session, you will have a chance to connect with some of our dynamic speakers who will answer your questions in a live Q&A chat. Take advantage of our networking opportunities and connect with fellow attendees in the lounge. Hear the ups and downs of fatherhood from some amazing fathers like myself on the All Pro Dad Excelling as a Father session sponsored by Liberty Mutual. Be informed and inspired to create a wealth plan and build your multi-generational legacy from our expert panelists sponsored by JP Morgan Chase. Be sure to get on the leaderboard to compete for great prizes daily. You can start by using the hashtag BMXCEL. Check the gamification tab to find out how you can score points and the leaderboard to check your status. Prizes will be awarded to the top 5 with the highest scores. Don't miss the opportunity to tap into the experience and expertise of our career coaches, Karen Williams, Ray Boone, and Ronald Harvey between the hours of 12 noon and 3 p.m. Following their sessions, each coach will be available for a live Q&A. Just go to the breakout tab on the nav bar and click Ask the Coaches.